Y'all ought to be able to see my screen now.
I don't see anything yet.
You don't see anything?
Oh, here we go. It's coming up. Here we go.
Okay. Currently, I'll try to go slow because I don't know how much latency there will be. And I'd hate to be talking about one screen and y'all see something completely different. So essentially the purpose of this meeting is just to get you all more familiarized with the way the project is set up, how the architecture of it, and the technologies involved with it. Right now, it's currently using several different technologies, including Java, of course. We're using Spring Framework for the server-side code, JavaScript. We're using a couple of cloud technologies, including RDS, which is AWS's relational database service, and we're using Postgres for the database engine. Eventually it'll have EC2 instances used, which that's just cloud servers. It's currently hosted. It's not the most up-to-date code, but it's what we had at the end of the semester in the fall.
Hey, real quick, Josh just sent me a message saying he's not going to be able to make it tonight, but I'll upload this to YouTube and he can watch the video.
Oh, great. That's great. Yeah, it's not a big issue if he's not here since we're recording.
Yeah.
And I'm always available for questions. But hey, so our database engine is Postgres, and we're running it on an Apache Tomcat server. Now, I'm using version 8.5, but I think it goes all the way through at least 9.0. So whenever y'all download and install the entire environment, I recommend at least version 8.5 because I don't know about any kind of backwards compatibility with the other Tomcat versions, which Apache Tomcat is just a web server that allows you to execute the code on your local machine, be able to see what goes on, and you can even adjust the server environment as well. It's actually quite nice. I wish they'd actually teach this kind of stuff at the different colleges. Okay, so what you're seeing right now is all of our code. There's a whole lot of different files involved in this, and we are using a design pattern called MVC. It stands for Model View Controller. It's a pretty simple design pattern. Really, all it is just the way you code it. You have a model, which would be something similar to one of these domain objects, like this represents a table in the database. As it looks right now, these would be what we would have in the database. I don't think this table actually exists yet, though. I just created a few things last semester to get things started. And then the model would also be able to interact with both the view, which is what we're using, the JSP files, and it would also be able to interact with the controller, which a controller is, it's just the entry point for the application. It allows you to send data to the back end, like what you're seeing right now. Each one of these methods right here represent a different action, I guess you could say, within the application. This one being a login, and then a register, which is all that I've got in our account controller. And the view represents the actual user interface, which this is our landing page right here, the code for it anyway, which is the index.jsp. And that's just a simple design pattern that dictates how you code it. So I'll go back to that controller and show you. I don't know how much y'all know about Spring or annotation specifically, because you'll notice all these different annotations above the different resources, and they all mean and do different things. Most likely the most common annotation that you've probably seen if you've done any Java coding is the override annotation, like that, which allows you to, it literally does as it says, override something. It might be a method in a parent class that you need to, override and do something different than what it originally was meant to do. Or it could be something like actually creating a concrete class. Not class, a concrete object or method. For example, we have this database class here that has two abstracted methods here, both the connect and close. Anything that inherits from this database class will be required to fill out both of these connect and close things. So you'll actually be forced into, if you have anything inherit from that, you'll, like for example here in our actual account database, we've got a connect method that forces a connection. And then there's a close somewhere in here that closes out the database connection. Within the servlet, which actually runs the application, gets it set up so that it works properly on the server. You got different configuration classes here in this configuration package. One of which is this properties class, which that is not its current name. I have made some edits to it in a different branch of the Git environment. So some of this may look outdated compared to the way I've changed it. But this file here allows us to go into our database and access an external file that I'll end up distributing to all of you because you'll need to to save it somewhere on your computer in order to make the application run properly. You'll need to also create an environment variable later. But this line here, this property source, what it does is it takes a file that's outside of the application that's at a predefined directory, which is represented by that right there. It pulls in an environment variable from your system and will then pull in that file at that location. And then in our database, we're actually using this class to grab the IP, the username, the password that is associated with the AWS database. Just for a little bit of added security, so that if this application actually went into production, we would be able to prevent anyone from being able to accidentally see data we don't want them to see. And it may not necessarily be necessary for this application. It's just best practices for writing an application. And currently, I've got this created into different, I'm going to call them tiers or layers. For example, you've seen the controller. That would be the first layer of the backend application. The next layer would be this service, like this. We call this service, which would then interact with the database and perform different actions, like it does. If you notice all of the different exceptions that I've got thrown here, particularly in this create method right here, there's a lot of exceptions if something is not formatted correctly. Now we're checking all of this in the front end as well, but it's good to validate this stuff in the back end as well, in case anyone has managed to access a controller or something they could send in malicious information. So just good to validated at each level. So that then will go to the database layer, which I've shown you already. It uses all these prepared statements to prep a data call to the backend database. And what it does is, instead of directly having the data put into a query, it allows you to put in these question marks here and then fill in the data programmatically without having to actually do it yourself. Instead of adding in a string here, it will handle it for you, which it's supposed to try to negate a SQL injection attack. Of course, I've never actually tested that theory, but in theory, it's supposed to protect you. And here's another query where it has a lot more of those different parameters that it's going to take in. We do have a hash algorithm that we're using in this. Right here, we have to use both of these methods. To actually create the hash, and it's already being implemented. In fact, you can actually see it in our database. I'll just pull that up right now. This is our database that we've got currently. It needs some redesign. I haven't had time to actually redesign it because there's some we need to change up the relations between the tables and create some other fields that I didn't originally create. But if you notice in the password column here, notice how long the passwords are. And here's a sample of a non-hashed password versus a hashed password using SHA-256. So it's actually hashed. Now, if someone were to try to go in there and steal one of these passwords and then pass it into the application and try to log in, they won't be able to get in because the application will hash it again, and it won't. The two passwords won't compare, and it'll fail. So that's a little bit more security that has been added to it, just for the sake of doing best practices, because some things are just default need to do. Now, has anybody ever heard of the term dependency injection?
I have not.
All right, so if any of y'all are actually looking to be a software developer ever, this next part might actually help you a little bit, because when I was a junior level developer, I would go into an interview, and almost every time they would ask me if I knew what dependency injection was. And I know of two different things that you could think of that would be dependency injection, and one of them, unfortunately, is wrong. So I'm going to clear out all these different tabs and bring up our one of our controllers. Right here, you see this auto-wired annotation? Well, that refers to a type of it is dependency injection. It's just Spring Framework's way of doing it. What it does is it allows us to declare this object right here. Now, if we were to get rid of this auto-wired right here and try to run our application like that, it would fail with a null pointer exception. So, in order to make it work, we have to auto-wire it. And the way that we do that is in one of these configuration files where we create these beans. They're called beans in Spring. It allows us to change the way it injects. So right now, this top bean will return back to whatever calls it an account service object. And right now, it's just returning back a standard object, no kind of configuration to it or default values. So it will automatically turn this account service into basically, as if you had actually instantiated it with the new keyword. It's really nice, to not have to have that excess code in there, because it kind of makes it a little messy when you have too much of it. But if anyone asks if you've ever seen or dealt with any kind of dependency injection, this is the a project where you will deal with some dependency injection. It just allows you to pull in a required dependency for a class or whatever you need for a method at runtime instead of having to do it at compile time. It just changes when it instantiates, really. Also, if y'all have any questions while I'm going through this, feel free to stop me. I know it's a lot of information at one time, but you don't need to memorize all of this. It took me a long time to truly learn how to do all of it without having to refer to a book or some notes or something. So we are creating our own custom exceptions here. Right now they don't really do a whole lot. Just a standard, give it a message and you can print the message, and that's about it. But that inherits from the exception class there, which makes it, work the same as an exception. I'm going to get rid of these files here, and I'm going to show you the user interface, which starts off with the index.jsp file. And the difference between JSP and something, simpler like HTML is that we can actually do a lot more with it. You'll notice at the top these lines of code here. They're called tag libs, or for tag library, really. Basically, they kind of work in a way sort of like an import statement would be. It pulls in, a library for you to be able to use. And in this case of this bottom one, where it has this prefix, it allows us to utilize that library with that prefix. In this case, it's the C prefix. So we're actually using that down here with these URL calls, C:\URL. It's just a different way of being able to pull in resources. Now, JSP actually allows you to write Java in it, which I have not done yet in any of this. But you're able to actually execute actual Java code in the user interface. And the reason you can do that is because all of the JSP pages, they sort of compile on the application server and then render in the browser as HTML. So what you'll see when you run it, if you inspect the element in your browser, you'll see HTML, but really it's not really HTML. And it's true for almost each and every website you encounter, because almost nobody writes in pure HTML anymore. They use a framework like this to make some things easier. And then right now we've got 4 web pages. This is login, which implements 3 different JavaScript files, and a registration page, and our student home page, which, Misty, you've seen most of that, with the exception of the change from HTML over.
Yeah.
Really, all I did was just copy and paste and then change it into JSP, which the majority of that was just adding the tag libs and changing over to C URLs. What you're seeing here in these href boxes, that /app/event, that's actually calling, making a call to our server to one of the controllers. So /app is the default, which is how you run our how you get our application in the browser. I'll show you how to run it in a minute, and then it sends the data to the event controller, or in this case inbox or survey. It's a default right now. It's going to just a regular controller. There's two different kinds of controllers, by the way. Forgot to mention that earlier. What I showed y'all earlier is what's called a REST controller. The regular controller is in this class right here. We have one class with a regular controller. What it does is when it makes a request to that controller, it'll route it to the proper method, and then our controllers are going to return a string, and these strings, student home, index, login, it refers to a file that we have in our JSP. So anytime we add to this, there has to be a file already created to be able to pull up. And the reason it already knows that it's going to be JSP, it's not going to automatically figure it's supposed to be JSP. It's configured in one of the configuration files to actually expect a JSP file to be there, and it goes ahead and automates the adding of the .JSP extension. So we don't actually have to type that every time. So just a little bit of automation there. So this is not only is this a Spring project, but it's also something that's known as a Maven project. And Maven, just helps with building your project. It helps, building as in compiling. It helps with importing various dependencies that the project depends on to be able to work properly. And the way that we do that, there's an XML file that we have to edit called the POM file. It's pom.xml, and it handles a lot of configuration. For example, one of the things that you can configure is the way that it packages the file up for the server. You can tell it what you want your Java compiler to be, which in this case it's set to Java version 8. You can add a lot of plugins to this thing, and down here you'll see all these different groupings of dependencies. In this case, a dependency is an external library that has to be downloaded. So what this does is it automates the download so that you or I or one of us do not have to go out to the internet, find these jar files. Jar means Java archive files. It's like an executable. But that way we don't have to download those files and then put them into the project. It automates that for us and makes it a lot easier. And all we have to do is just tell it what version, really, for the majority of it. And that's the benefit of having a Maven project versus a non-Maven. If we'd done this in Android Studio, we could have done the exact same thing with Gradle. It just helps you to pull in all of those different dependencies. One very important thing is with our JSP files, our resources are not located right there with the files. Resources meaning our image files, JavaScript, and any of our CSS style sheets. They're located one directory back over here in source main web app resources. So you got all of those here. and that's the way that we have it, the application built to pull them in. Now, we also have to pull them in through any kind of security that we put, which I've been working on implementing some security in a different branch. I'll describe that in a second. But right now I've got it pulled out of this particular version of the project so that everything works properly, because I'm still working on one piece of it that's not letting us actually log into the website. Okay, so everything is in GitHub right now, and I've been using this tool, which is a pretty common tool to use with Git, called SourceTree. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of SourceTree before or even used Git, but this allows you to have sort of a user interface environment to access the GitHub repository. It also works for GitLab, Amazon Code Commit, TortoiseGit, all of those others. And so I'm able to pull, push, fetch objects, and merge branches right here from my local computer, instead of having to actually go to github.com and manually do everything. This just helps, make it easier. And there are different things called branches, which allow you to sort of keep code away from each other. For example, I have this branch here called Jonathan Security Implementation, which is where all of my security code is, but I'm not ready for that to be part of the main project yet, so I've got it branched away, which means that it's there, but it won't mess with anybody else's code. So you can create a branch off of the development environment, take the development branch, copy it, and rename a new branch and work on it, and be able to do all sorts of work on it, and then push that up into the repository, and then we can merge the two branches together, bring in the new changes over to the main branch, so that everyone can see it. And I'll go over Git at a later time when it's better. Probably put it in writing to help be able to let y'all ask questions better and read it, keep it with you instead of having to refer to a video, because Git's pretty important in any software development career. In fact, you cannot get around it, as it pretty much anybody that actually is a real company uses it, because it allows for version control. For example, let's say that we're all working on a project. One of us gets pissed off at someone else, so we decide to ruin the project, put in a whole bunch of bad code, or build in a backdoor that allows unauthorized access, and we push it up thinking, oh yeah, there's nothing they can do about it. Well, it's not true, because you can actually revert a bad commit with Git. You can go into the repository and just delete the entire thing. Even here, really, you can do it right there where it says reverse commit. I can undo the entire commit and make it as if it never happened. So if someone says, just delete all the code, push it up, it's impossible to actually create lasting damage in that kind of way anyway. So it's just a good way of preventing disgruntled employees from ruining something. So that's SourceTree. So I'm going to go ahead and build the project so that y'all can see how to do it in Eclipse. So I'm going to go up here to the very top where it says App, and I'm going to right-click on it, and I'm going to come down here to Run As, and then I'm coming over here to Other. Now, it may already, this run on server right here may already be in the run as directory, or in your case, it could possibly be in the other folder. Mine somehow got installed in the other category. So you just click on run on server, and it'll start running everything here in your console, doing a whole bunch of logging, and then it'll bring up your index page. Your console also will show server startup, and it'll tell you how long it took to start up. Our application should take almost no time to start up. So if you're ever trying to run it and it's lagging and taking a long time, it probably has something to do with the environment, or there's something wrong in the code. At least at this point in time, that's true. So I'm going to move this app over to an actual browser. Makes it better for running. The URL that we're going to be using for the index page, and I'll post this in Slack at some point. It's going to be http://localhost, and we're running it on port 80, and then /app. And when you click that, it'll actually bring up the entire application. And that's how it looks in a web browser, in a real web browser. And you can actually inspect the element and see the code, and see how it renders down to HTML code instead of having JSP rendering in your browser. So as you can see that there's no longer that C:URL. It's now just a plain href. But this logs us in. We just create, we got a default email address that I've created just to demonstrate. Click submit, and it takes us to our home page, which is just a few buttons right now because we haven't coded anything. But you can also, I've got a simple log out, takes us back to index, and you have to log back in. Unfortunately, right now, since I don't have any security in it, we have a big hole in the application, like such an easy access if we wanted to. Without logging in, just go straight to the home page and completely avoid the login process. So we really don't have to do that right now. We can just go straight to home, which is what Spring Security allows us to implement. What it does is, instead of being able to just do that, we have to actually, it will force us to an authorized page, which right now is the index page, this page, and our registration page. So those are the only 3 pages that you can get on without actually having proper credentials. And that's because, you either need to log in or you need to create a new account. So this will, if you try to submit it right now as is, it's going to show a little bit of validation issues. Right now, the ones that are highlighted in red are the fields that are required right now on registration. And the reason that I did that was because some of these fields, like the address field or your major, things like that, can be filled in at a later time once you're actually in the application. That way we don't have to have such a rigid application that makes it harder to quickly create an account. So they can always get in a profile page, which will eventually be required to add to the application. Unfortunately, right now, we do not have a back button here to go back. But anyway, this is how our application currently looks. And there will be a lot of changes made to it over the semester. One of the changes that I see as valuable is we had a second button here for administrator login. Temporarily, I removed it because I don't think we'll actually need two different login areas, and we could just combine the two into a single unified screen that allows us to just log in, and then our application server will return a role in with the account object so that we can then change the different screen, whether they go to student home page or an admin home page, based on their authorized role. So that way we can have less code, ultimately, instead of creating two different environments. So that's how our application is right now. There is a lot more that I could discuss with you, but I'm afraid to give y'all information overload, to be honest. So do y'all have any questions right now, or have anything that you want me to demonstrate to you?
I'm good, but some other people might.
Yeah, I think I'm good too. I'm definitely gonna probably watch this video over as I try to get caught up a little bit on this.
It's a lot of information, especially since they don't teach it at NSU or any college, to be honest. They really have a lack of the actual industry because classes they teach you Java or they teach you Python or HTML, but they don't teach you how to put it all together. And they don't mention the word framework ever. So it makes it kind of a bit of a learning curve. I was working on an associate's degree at FIPSI in Bossier, and unfortunately, I thought I was good at Java until I actually started a job. One of the things I learned was something called an enumeration. Now, I don't know if y'all have ever heard of what an enumeration is, but if you've ever done any Java coding of any kind, you've probably seen one and didn't know what it was. But it allows you to have predefined values and run methods on them. Java has a particular well-known enumeration called color that allows you to do color.red, color.green. Well, this is basically what it is. It's just returning back like a hexadecimal value. There's a lot of stuff to learn, but there's also some good resources out there if you really want to get really deep in it. Things like Udemy or even YouTube really will have some good videos if you really want to learn how to do coding like this. But I'm not going to just allow anyone to not know what they're doing. Anytime you all have any questions, I will answer and help you. The majority of what we have to code, or what's left to code, will actually not be that hard. The majority of the setup was the configuration, trying just, to configure the server. Right now, like right here in this particular version of it, I'm using Java-based configuration, which I've changed that over to XML-based. So some of the files have even gone away. So it'll look a little cleaner whenever I get the security implemented. But if y'all don't have any questions, I guess we can end. Actually, earlier than I expected.
You did a lot of hard work, Jonathan. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Well, actually, to be honest, this is like what I love to do in life. If I could just quit my job, be rich, and just code all day, I would.
Right?
I'm glad somebody likes to do that.
This is like...
It's not me.
I went all the way up to Virginia just to do it.
That's awesome.
And, well, of course, I left Virginia, but now I'm actually trying to move my career towards the AWS cloud.
That's where it's going.
It's really an amazing set of technologies. Even my job's even set up a class for everyone to go to certify in it. So maybe in 2 more weeks I'll have another certification.
Awesome.
So, all right. Well, if y'all don't have any questions, I'll go ahead and we can go ahead and end it. And converse via Slack. If y'all have any questions, I will answer all questions. No question is considered to be a dumb question here, because there's a lot involved.
I accept that challenge.
Trust me, if you could think of it, I probably asked someone that.
All right. Well, yeah, I don't have any questions right now, but if I have any, I'll let you know.
Okay, that sounds good. I will talk to you at a later time, and I don't think we have a sprint to do yet. I've been watching Moodle for that, so we don't get behind.
Yeah, I think we have like a Sprint 0. I don't know what that's about. I'll have to look at it, but I don't think it's due for another couple weeks.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. Actually, I think I've got I have a calendar somewhere that I was holding. 27th is when our first thing in Mendex is due, and then February 3rd is first sprint. Which, have y'all done anything with Mendex yet?
Nope.
Okay. Do you know if she's supposed to send out some sort of thing with it?
She said register with your NSU account. That's all she said.
Good, that I've already done that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I messed around with it a little bit last semester when we were finishing up the project. I was going to code the app through there, but I didn't get a chance to really do too much with it. So
I looked at it. I already hate it.
to me, it can't be any worse than Java.
Than Java? I love Java.
I'm not a big coder, so the full code stuff is good for me. I see it, man. And
Is everybody there?
I'm here.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
thought John
sure.
disappeared.
Went quiet for a little bit.
Well, anytime I see anything that says low-level coding platform, I cringe. Because
yeah, I know.
Go ahead.
I would say it's definitely not the best. So just for me, it's a lot easier because I don't have to try to figure out all the coding stuff.
That's true. I always forget that I'm had a few years on everyone else, and I've been doing this for a little while now.
Yeah, you're light years ahead of me on this stuff. I'll tell you that.
And actually, everything that you just saw, I learned from a book.
That's awesome.
So I got laid off into 2017, and right before I got laid off, I had actually bought a book on all of this right here, and that's how I learned it all.
Nice.
Yeah. So it changes from time to time, but you just have to Google the changes, and you can learn it pretty fast. But it is a lot to take in. I still get overwhelmed at work because I'm expected to get actually a couple of more certifications quite quickly because they told me make myself look better. So that's why I'm taking that class at the end of this month, and then I've got another certification that I'm prepping for. So 3 in about 3 weeks.
Woo.
That's what I'll have. Well,
That's a lot
I'll
of
have
work.
3. I've got 1. I've got 2 more that I'll have within 3 weeks. So that's going to make me look good because the way we do our work is we leverage ourselves out to other contracts. So if I'm not working, I'm certifying in something, or at least I am now. Hi. Well, I think we can go ahead and end the call for
All
this
right.
evening.
I'll
Y'all have a
upload
good
this.
night.
I'll upload this in YouTube and send you guys the link.
Hey, yeah, because Josh will need to watch it. All right.
Yep.
Y'all have a good night.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks, you too.
Bye bye.